So I want to take a minute this morning to show you how to set up the rowing machine properly for land training, because used well, the rowing machine can be a fantastic fitness tool, but used incorrectly, the rowing machine can lead to burnout and also to injury, which can be really big issues. So let's get started. So I'm sitting on the sliding seat here, and I want to first check my foot position. So typically you want to make sure that the strap is over the ball of your foot. So when your heel's resting all the way down in the bottom of the shoe retention. I'm in sandals today, but it's often nice to row in tennis shoes. They're just a little more comfortable in the foot stretchers. Then the other thing you want to check as you're getting ready is where the damper is set. So generally speaking, if the damper is set to a much lower level, you're going to experience less resistance. If it's set to a higher level, you're going to experience more resistance. A resistance that's any higher than about 7 is higher than the load that you wind up experiencing in the boat, and that can lead to injury. It's a common starting mistake to set the resistance extra high, because then you can feel that resistance when you're rowing, but that doesn't reflect the conditions that we experience on the water. So typically, depending on how strong you are, you might have your resistance set somewhat higher in the range of 6 to 7. If you are not as strong, it's also perfectly acceptable to keep your resistance set somewhere closer to 4 and 5. There's also a setting on the monitor that tells you your resistance quantitatively, because the exact setting here can depend on the conditions of the particular rower that you are on. We're not going to dive into that here, but just be aware that's a possibility. Some rowing machines will have a handle holder on them, other rowing machines will not. You can use this as you're getting ready, but typically when you go to store the erg, you want to make sure that you leave the handle up against the cage. That just helps with long-term maintenance. So now let's take a look at some of the elements on the screen to finish out our setup. Okay, so here's our rowing machine monitor, and to get it started, this is what popped up when I initially pulled on the handle. And typically speaking, we prefer to train with the display down here showing a power curve. So to get over to that display, I'm just going to push the display button, and what you see now is the power curve. So if I start to take some strokes, you can see my power curve. Up top right now we're in units of calories per hour. We typically work in units of your 500 meter split, so that's how long it takes to go 500 meters. And at the moment my upper display is just a clock, lower display here is the distance that I have rowed. And then over on the right hand side here you can see my strokes per minute. When you're setting up the erg to do pieces, you're going to push the menu button, and that will bring up a range of different options. If you're going to do a workout that is a set distance or a set time, you're going to push the select workout button, and then you have a couple of options here. If you just check through, you'll see there's sort of a standard set of pieces already loaded in, some intervals, and then our standard racing distances of 2,000 meters and 5,000 meters. The custom list has a couple of other potential options, things like intervals of 1 minute on, 1 minute rest, or 30-30. But generally speaking, you're going to wind up using the new workout button. And then this is going to give you options to either row a single distance, a single time, some amount of calories, we don't tend to use that, or potentially interval pieces. For the single distance menu, so default is 2,000 meters. So if you want to do something like 500 meters, typically you just go to the next unit over, and we'll go up to 5. Then we'll clear out the 2. And sometimes you can change these other options. They're not so critical for us. So from there you could just press OK, and now your monitor is set to row 500 meters. If you're looking to do a single time, just same thing, new workout, single time, and this will let you set some interval time for your piece. Now, if you've done pieces and you want to look back at how you did, you can use the memory button, and this will show a couple different possibilities. I find the list by date to be the most convenient because that's going to pull up the most recent piece that I did. Then you can use the little magnifying glass to look at the details of that particular piece. So in the big picture, training on the rowing machine is really about learning how to be consistent in your rowing. So we practice this consistency in two different ways. One of those is that typically we'll try to row pieces at a specific stroke rating. So that could be anywhere from about an 18 stroke per minute pace if you're doing a low steady state piece, up through about a 34, 36 strokes per minute if you're doing a very fast sprint piece. So we try and keep our stroke rating consistent on a given piece. And then along with that, we also try to practice consistent pacing. So that comes out in your 500 meter split. When you're first getting started, the big thing you need to do at that stage is just keep track of what your average 500 meter split is. That's going to give you a sense of the sort of pace that you can hold consistently while you are rowing. Once you start to learn what your 500 meter pace is, then you can use that to pace yourself depending on the distance or the length of time for a given piece. So for example, if I'm getting ready to sit down and do a set of shorter 500 meter pieces, I know a particular target split that I will aim to hold for a 500 meter piece. And then in contrast, if I'm sitting down to do a 5K, I know I have a different split and pace that I can hold across that 5K. And in either case, it can be very helpful to record your workouts so then you can go back and revisit your split times in the future, and that will help you figure out what pace is appropriate for an upcoming workout.